Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in China in the past 24 hours. We are diving straight into the biggest development. Japan and South Korea are moving closer, and that is a big deal because the Indo-Pacific's old comfort zone is getting squeezed from every direction. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung hosted Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi last week in Andong for a two-day summit that was part diplomacy, part regional stress test, and part, can these two actually keep this going? There was a banquet. There were traditional fireworks. There was even a lighter moment where the two leaders swapped eyeglasses for a photo. Good optics, yes. But the real story was not the photo op. It was two major U.S. allies trying to build muscle memory with each other while China gets more forceful and Washington looks less predictable. This relationship has baggage. Takaichi is a conservative nationalist who has defended parts of Japan's wartime past. Lee is a liberal who has criticized Japan over occupation-era history, so nobody should confuse this for a sudden diplomatic buddy comedy. This is more practical than emotional. Seoul and Tokyo are looking at the map, looking at Beijing, looking at the Iran war's effect on energy and supply chains, and deciding that historical friction cannot be allowed to paralyze them. Japan is especially active here. Takaichi is pushing a sharper version of the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy associated with Shinzo Abe. She is trying to make Japan the steady organizer in a region where allies still need the U.S., but also want more backup plans. Earlier this month, she traveled to Vietnam and Australia, then to South Korea, promoting roughly $10 billion in emergency responses to fuel shortages and supply chain disruption tied to the Iran war. That is not glamorous diplomacy, but it is the kind that matters when oil prices, shipping lanes, and national security planning all start colliding. The economic backdrop is worth watching too. Japan just slipped behind China to become the world's third largest net creditor, even though Japan's net external assets hit a record 561.75 trillion yen, or about $3.53 trillion. Germany stayed in first place. China moved into second. Japan's overseas investments are still massive, but its external liabilities also grew because foreign investors hold more Japanese securities after a strong Japanese stock market. That ranking shift is not just accountant trivia. It is another small sign that China's financial weight keeps expanding even as Japan tries to lead more of the region's security response. Beijing, unsurprisingly, is not clapping politely from the balcony. China is pushing back on Japan across several lanes at once: diplomatic messaging, maritime pressure, and economic coercion. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Myung dismissed Tokyo's argument that Japan remains exclusively defense-oriented. She pointed to higher military spending, loosened defense export rules, long-range missiles, counterattack capabilities, nuclear material concerns, and constitutional revision debates. Beijing is calling this neo-militarism, which is the kind of phrase China deploys when it wants the entire region thinking about 1930s Japan before anyone even gets to the policy details. The pressure is not only rhetorical. China has tightened export controls on dual-use goods for Japanese military users and military purposes, including rare earth elements and other critical minerals. That matters because China dominates rare earth magnet production. And those magnets are in everything from electric vehicles to fighter jets to precision weapons. Japan still has important manufacturing capacity, but it depends on China for certain heavy rare earths. Beijing knows this. It is putting a hand on the supply chain valve and making sure Tokyo sees it. China also kept up pressure around the disputed Diaoyu Dao, known in Japan as the Senkaku Islands. On May 26, the China Coast Guard said it expelled a Japanese fishing boat called Shishi from waters Beijing claims as its own. The Coast Guard framed it as law enforcement. Tokyo sees these waters very differently. That is the gray zone dance. Enough pressure to assert sovereignty, not enough to force a full crisis, repeated often enough that everyone starts treating the friction as normal background noise. The Quad is also moving in ways Beijing clearly dislikes. Foreign ministers from Australia, India, Japan, and the U.S. met Tuesday in New Delhi. They agreed to jointly build a port in Fiji and sign pacts on critical minerals and energy security. China responded by warning against exclusive cliques and bloc confrontation, which is diplomatic code for We notice the port, we notice the minerals, and we do not love this group chat. The big picture is that infrastructure, energy, and minerals are now strategic terrain. The Indo-Pacific contest is not only about ships and aircraft, it is about who builds the ports, who secures the materials, and who can keep supply chains running when the lights start flickering. There is also a fresh China-Pakistan development today. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif wrapped up a visit to Beijing with what both sides called a new broad consensus to deepen strategic ties. The focus is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Gwadar Port, the Kunjarab Pass, and upgrades to the Karakoram Highway. In plain English, Beijing and Islamabad want to make their connectivity project more useful, more secure, and more attractive to third parties. Pakistan also promised targeted steps to protect Chinese workers and investments after repeated militant attacks. That part is essential because Beijing likes infrastructure, but it does not like its engineers becoming targets. The statement also pulled in Middle East diplomacy, Afghanistan, and Taiwan. China praised Pakistan's role in easing the temporary U.S.-Iran ceasefire and hosting talks in Islamabad. Both sides backed a 5-point initiative for Middle East peace. Pakistan reaffirmed the One China principle and opposed Taiwan independence. China and Pakistan also named groups like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and the Eastern Turkestan Islamic Movement as threats if they use regional territory to launch attacks. This is Beijing bundling infrastructure, counterterrorism, diplomacy, and Taiwan into one strategic package with a Belt and Road ribbon on top. Now add Russia to the picture. Vladimir Putin's visit to Beijing, coming right after Trump's own summit there, gave Xi Jinping a chance to show that China can host rival powers back-to-back and keep everyone guessing. Xi and Putin did not finalize the major gas pipeline Russia wants, which is notable because Moscow would love more dependable energy outlets. But they did tout their unyielding bond and signed deals covering trade, education, technology, and more. Beijing is engaging Washington, but it is not letting go of Moscow. For Russia, China remains the senior partner with the bigger wallet and the better global reception desk. On Taiwan, this is an update to the broader pressure pattern listeners have been tracking. Taiwan reported another Chinese Joint Combat Readiness Patrol, the second in a week. The strategic point is not the exact aircraft count. The point is normalization. Beijing is making pressure around Taiwan feel routine, then layering that routine with higher-end capabilities. Taiwan monitored Chinese aircraft, warships, and the Liaoning aircraft carrier operating in the Western Pacific. Taiwanese officials also said more than 100 Chinese ships remained positioned along the first island chain. The danger is warning time. A Taiwanese defense analyst warned that Chinese cruise missile-capable warships operating close to Taiwan could give air defenses only minutes to react. That is the operational detail that matters because it changes political risk. If leaders in Taipei believe warning time is shrinking, they have to make faster decisions under higher pressure. That is exactly the kind of stress Beijing wants to impose without necessarily firing the first shot. China is also tightening its internal security messaging at home. Authorities publicized the case of Zhu, a PhD graduate from a key 985 university who worked as an aerospace engineer and was sentenced to 15 years in prison for espionage. Officials said he knowingly accepted tasks from a foreign spy organization, photographed aerospace and military technology materials, transmitted them abroad, and illegally earned 596,400 RMB. The message is clear. Elite education does not protect you if Beijing decides you are the cautionary tale. And finally, Chinese authorities are going after staged online rumors and AI-generated misinformation. The Cybersecurity Bureau released 5 cases, including a fake kidnapping livestream, a staged overseas fraud story, false claims involving underage pregnancies, AI-generated footage of a supposed Zhangjiajie glass bridge collapse, and fake content about a factory explosion. Some offenders were detained, and one AI-related case moved into criminal compulsory measures. Beijing is treating the information environment as a security space, not just a content problem. In China's system, viral fakery, public order, and state control are all sitting at the same table. Thanks for listening. If this episode was useful, take a second to leave a review or drop a comment. It makes a real difference in getting this in front of the right audience. We also publish a daily intel brief on Substack at restrictedhandling.substack.com with deeper coverage on Russia, China, Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK. Have a great rest of your day.